Hello, my name is Brianna Hinch, and I will be discussing Percy Grainger and his use of folk songs. Grainger wrote pieces that most wind musicians have played or at least listened to before. In many of his pieces, and in most that are mostly often recognized, he incorporated folk songs into his melodies. Some were straight from the melodies sung by the folk singers he recorded, and some were a combination of several reels or folk songs. I wanted to do this topic because of what we discussed in class about other composers like Bartok using folk melodies in their music and whether they appropriated or appreciated their music. And I hope to leave those listening with the knowledge on how we can avoid appropriation in cultures when we're trying to appreciate them through their music. So today I will discuss what kind of folk songs he incorporated and how doing so benefited his career. I will then discuss Grainger's thoughts while writing his pieces and what he aimed to do with the folk songs he used. I will talk about his most famous works and how they've affected modern music, and I will also discuss how he was inspired or motivated by the English folk music movement. The three most famous works that I will talk about today are Green Bushes, Molly on the Shore, and Lincoln Sharpsburg. Like I said, most have at least played these works if you play an wind instrument or have heard them and would recognize their melodies. To start off, I will talk about Green Bushes. This piece was taken from an English folk song called Green Bushes. Here's an example of the original lyrics and the melody.
As I was a-walking one morning in May, to hear the sweet birds sing aloud from the spray, I heard a young damsel, and sweetly sang she. Down by the green bushes he thinks to meet me. I stepped right up to her, and thus did I say, "Why wait you, my fair one, so long by the way? My true love, so sweetly sang she. Down by the green bushes he thinks to meet me."
Grainger wrote what his purpose was for writing this piece and how he felt it should sound to the ears of others. He says, "It seems to breathe that lovely passion for the dance that swept like a fire over Europe in the Middle Ages. Seems brimful of all the youthful joy and tender romance that so naturally seek an outlet in dancing." And though he mentions why the melody makes him happy and how he wants others to perceive it, it still does not mention the original meaning of the folk song, the melody, or exactly where it came from. It seems as though he has tried to take the melody and call it his own, and while it doesn't say that directly, it is often perceived that way. The next piece is Molly on the Shore. Molly on the Shore is a fan favorite because of his use of the woodwinds. This piece features clarinet for the main melody of Molly on the Shore, and it also incorporates the Irish reel of the Temple Hill. Here's an example of Percy Grainger playing this melody on the piano. Keep in mind the speed at which he's playing is much faster than would be expected for a wind instrument. In his program notes, he says, "In setting Molly on the shore, I strove to imbue the accompanying parts that made up the harmonic texture with the melodic character not too unlike the underlying real tune. Melody seems to me to provide music with initiative, whereas rhythm appears to me to exert an enslaving influence. For that reason, I have tried to avoid regular rhythmic domination in my music, always accepting irregular rhythms, such as those of the Gregorian chant, which seem to me to make for freedom. Equally with melody, I prize discordant harmony because of the emotional and compassionate sway it exerts." While I believe this is a beautiful description of the melody, it still does not explain anything behind the original folk tune, why it was sung, or what it meant to the folk people. This is a trend that we continue to see as Granger continues to write his music. The last piece I will talk about is Lincolnshire Posy. This piece is a compilation of folk songs recorded in Lincolnshire, England. The original recordings are not Granger's, but were borrowed, and is what he used to represent his music. Each movement was meant to represent not only the vocals, but the personality of each person that was recorded. In his program notes, it says, as a whole work, Lincolnshire Posy was conceived and scored by me for wind band early in 1937. Five out of the 6 movements of which it is made up existed in no other finished form, though most of these movements, as is the case with almost all of my compositions and settings for whatever medium, were indebted more or less to unfinished sketches for a variety of mediums, covering many years. In this case, the sketches date from 1905 to 1937. These indebtednesses are stated in the score. This bunch of quote-unquote musical wildflowers, hence the title, is based on folk songs collected in Lincolnshire, England. One notated by Miss Lucy E. Broadwood, the other 5 noted by me, mainly in the years of 1905 to 1906 and with the help of the phonograph. And the work is dedicated to the old folk singers who sang so sweetly to me. Indeed, each number is intended to be a kind of musical portrait of the singer who sang its underlying melody. A musical portrait of the singer's personality, no less, of his habits of the song, his regular or irregularly wonts of rhythm, his preference or gaunt or ornately arabesque delivery, his contrasts of legato and staccato, his tendency towards breadth or delicacy of tone. Many believe the main reason that Granger was so reliant on the use of folk songs was because of the English folk song revival that occurred both in the early 1900s and the 1930s, when many of his pieces were written, including the 3 that I have mentioned. This would help some understand why his use of folk songs was so prevalent. There is also proof of this in the way that other composers like Ralph Vaughan Williams, though each composer had their own way of recording the folk tune, it was evident that they were all writing different sections of the same way. Looking at Granger's music and his use of folk songs, we can see that he used a lot of their melodies for his own benefit, and while it severely benefited his career, it did not benefit the folk people at all. Though it may not have directly harmed them either, there's still ways that we can preserve the culture of people while trying to appreciate their culture. Thank you for listening to my presentation about Granger and his use of folk songs, and I hope that looking at the way he used it and the way he didn't appreciate them the way we all hoped, we can look forward and aim to not do the same as Granger.